Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam. I'm glad you're joining us for today. It's been a long time, Josh.
Yeah, I want to make a shout out to everybody watching on YouTube right now. Hey, and welcome to the show. Glad that you're here. Glad that you're watching. Glad that you're listening.
And by long time, I mean like 5 minutes for us.
Yeah. That's why this episode and last episode we're wearing the exact same thing. This is my Ridge shirt. I just got this free from the Austin Ridge Church. This is their student ministry. One of the people that Jackie discipled. She's the girls minister down there at their Southwest campus. Great church. They're in the one of the best cities in America, Austin, Texas. So, anyways,
yeah, I mean, Texas is a great place. It's my third favorite state. So
yeah. Not everybody's as smart as us, but you can have it as third if you want. So let's talk about the sponsor, though.
Yeah, we certainly want to thank Church Teams and Boyd Pelly, the founder. And they do a wonderful job for churches. If you haven't heard of Church Teams, well, then this is probably your first episode because they've been a sponsor.
Welcome.
They've been a sponsor of the show for quite some time. And here's the thing. If you've been thinking about it, you should reach out to them. Go to est.church. est.church. There's an offer there for 2 free months. Church Teams can help you with just about any church management software system related problem. And they do everything from texting to check-in to giving. It is a comprehensive system. It is priced well. And so it's like a scalable system. So it doesn't matter how small you are or how large you are. Whether you're a small church or a large church, they've got systems that scale. They've got prices that scale. So go to est.church, check out their free offer, fill out that form. Obviously, it's a resource. It's a product that we believe in, but you also help the show. So if you've been listening to the show and you're like, hey, I need to do this, please go to est.church and give Church Teams a contact.
Yeah.
All right, demographics.
Yeah, we talk about demographics a lot. This is a little different. We talk about it from a missional standpoint. We want to talk about it now from a reality standpoint. I was listening to a podcast earlier today, not this podcast, a different podcast. I do that sometimes. And the host of the show was talking about one of the factors that will lead to the decline of a church. And one of the 8 factors that he mentioned was that the community demographics shift. This is a reality that we know, but it's not often a reality that we do anything about. So what he mentioned was that in the community around the church that he was pastoring, it shifted. At one point in the 70s, 80s, it was the vibrant downtown young professionals, very close to the up-and-coming neighborhoods of that community, that city, that urban city there. And over time, though, it spread and spread and spread. The urban sprawl, people moved, demographics shifted. He made the mention, Sam, he said that all communities have an infancy, an adolescence, a maturation, a decline, and then a potential death. Now, I say potential death. He said eventual death. I say potential death because, as you and I both have seen, everybody knows there's gentrification, there's revitalization of communities. There's sometimes areas that are in decline, but the city will come in very wisely. They'll build parks, extend roads out, do some, different things. They'll bring in an employer, and it grows. My question, Sam, though, is for this episode, how do you prepare for that? What are some of the ways that we can prepare, expect it, and then we can shift if we are in the middle of it? What do you think?
Yeah, well, let's just say that this is just about every church community. Sure. Almost every community is changing demographically. Rare in today's world does a community not change. 99% of the counties in the United States are more ethnically diverse now. The white population, according to the last census, declined for the first time since 1790. And declined by millions and millions and millions of people, tens of millions I guess Caucasian would be the right demographic term. Forgive me if I'm
Like
offensive
white folk.
and don't use
Yeah.
don't use the right demographic term. I don't mean to be offensive.
I think we're
I'm
allowed
just-
to talk about white people. Like, I'm allowed to say that since I'm a white folk. So that's what we call us.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I think we're allowed.
But what that means is that all of the growth, not some, not part, not most, not the vast majority, literally all of the growth in the United States is due to ethnic minorities and immigrants. They are not just moving to Miami, LA, and New York anymore. They're moving into every community. 99% of all counties are now are ethnically more diverse than they were 10 years ago. So not only do you have demographic changes when it comes to ethnicity, you have demographic changes due to age, you have demographic changes due to socioeconomics. There's a lot of things that are shifting today. People are not wanting to travel as much to work. Work from home is a very real thing. Even if you're forced to go into the office every day, a lot of times people prefer hybrid work, if not full out work from home, which means rural communities are more attractive if they have high-speed internet. If you have the ability to Zoom and all of that, you can pretty much, for some professions, live anywhere. And even those that aren't necessarily moving to a whole new state or a whole new town, they are staying put in their community more so. On top of that, millennials are the least mobile generation really since we've been counting, since the early 1900s. A lot of people think that all these young people, all these millennials, are just moving around all over the place. Actually, it's the baby boomers that move a lot. The millennials are the least mobile generation. So, if you can actually if you can get young people in your church, you're likely to keep them. I mean, there's a lot of things that are here. I give you all of that. It's basically like, drinking from a fire hose of statistics here. I say all of that because your community demographics are likely shifting. Almost certainly they are. And many times, because people remain in their own bubbles, they don't see it. Mm-hmm. So at my own church, for instance, we are still, I would say we're a predominantly white church. We are roughly 25%, maybe a little more, ethnic minority. I've heard that technically that makes us a multi-ethnic church. I'm not going to say that we're multi-ethnic until we match the community, which is now 45 to 50% ethnic minority in our area. It was 35 to 40% when I got here 8 years ago. So we are more ethnically diverse now. And some people, you tell that to some people in our community, they would say, I don't see it. Well, it's because you're hanging out with your white friends at the same place. You're not
or your
branching
black
out.
Friends or your Hispanic friends. Yeah,
Right.
everybody stays.
Well, I say
in
that
their
because
own
I'm
demographic.
white.
Yeah, right.
I'm just, I'm trying to avoid really controversial stuff here.
Yeah,
Anyway, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just go right into
Yeah,
it.
it's just the way it is. Yeah,
No, but that's not sinful or anything like that. It's just
the way
you
people
may say,
are. Yeah,
it's the way people are, and you may say, well, I just don't see that in my community, but it's there. And the only reason you don't see it is because you're not going to the grocery store. You're going to your same grocery store. You don't go to the grocery store that the other people go to. Mm-hmm. So I would just say every church's community demographics are shifting. And if you don't shift with them, you'll die. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, I would say, so really what you're capturing there through all the statistics and stuff is it is happening. And, I'm used to the southern sprawling bigger cities. Even here, that's the same sort of concept that's happening. People are moving out. There's these big neighborhoods that pop up. They get subdivided and so it's happening, and you need to be aware of it. Go ahead and accept it. I think there are very rare occasions where there's a very rural community in which this is just the way it is, and it's always been this way, and it's the same demographic of people. However, I would say this, just notice that demographics are not just ethnicity. They could be also just a different kind of people. Same ethnicity, different kind of people. I'll give you an example of that. So in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, as people move out into these different areas, they're moving out into rural areas, but they are a different education level. They have a different interest level. They have different brands and different, just a different lifestyle. They're taking it out there with them. They're not moving out. These young professionals are not moving out there and moving on to farms and starting farms. They're not doing that. They're moving into suburbs with their Toyotas and the brands that they like and their Apple equipment, and they are still commuting in to have fun and hang out and work. So I think that paying attention to that, looking around, is just acknowledging. The first step is just saying, this is shifting. It's shifting. The question is not, is it shifting? It's which direction is it shifting to, and are we going to make that shift with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can use my own community as an example.
Sure.
We are seeing a fairly significant influx of people of Spanish-speaking background. I'll just say that. I think we have at least, it's around 20 countries represented in my church from people who speak Spanish, bilingually, or they only speak Spanish. 20 countries, mainly South and Central America. That blows my mind. They're not this monolithic group. I mean, goodness, people from Brazil, which speaks Portuguese, we have several of those as well. Very different from Guatemalans. Like, they're completely different countries. And our Spanish-speaking pastor, Jesus, he's Mexican, which is very different than the Cubans that are here. So what's happening in the Bradenton area is there are people of a Spanish-speaking background that are moving in. The poorer whites are being priced out, a lot of times by property taxes, because property taxes are very steep here. And they are being replaced by middle and upper class Hispanics. And I do know, I think I've said this before on the show, Hispanic is a demographic term. It's kind of made up. I know the background there. And I know that by the time you get to like third generation, they don't even call themselves Hispanics anymore. They don't identify that way. I get all that. I'm just trying to use terms that everyone understands. So what we're seeing here is a gentrification, as you might say, like a rise up in the socioeconomic part of the community, but that rise up is coming through ethnic minorities, which a lot of people don't. They think,
right?
Oh, these white people move in,
yeah,
and they buy up all these homes and push all of the ethnic minorities out. That does happen, and that is a real issue, and there are downsides to gentrification, and communities can be ruined by gentrification. There's plenty of examples of that. Bradenton's a little different story, and as our nation becomes more ethnically diverse, which it will, we will not. So let me just be frank here. The white people aren't having enough babies to sustain the economy. If we rely on the white majority, we will fail economically. That's just a fact. You may not like that. I don't think you should care, but you may not. If you don't like it, it's a fact. Which means we're going to rely on immigration. Without immigrants, our economy will collapse. Our birth rates aren't high enough to sustain the economy.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Most of the people that are coming in speak Spanish. That's what's happening in Florida. I think Florida is kind of at the forefront. Texas probably a little bit too, kind of at the forefront of this. But they're moving in everywhere. And churches you must respond. When my children, I'm hoping that we get to stay here in our community and that my kids stay in this community and we all, my grandkids come to my church and all that. I don't know what'll happen, but I hope that. But let's assume that happens. Well, guess what? My grandkids are going to want to go to a church that looks like their schools. And if your church doesn't look like your preschools, you got a problem. You've got a serious problem. Now,
Okay,
I think you can solve it through the children's ministry, which we can talk about. But I'll let you speak.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's good. That's the way it is. The question though is, so what do churches do? What should you do? How do you begin to diversify? And in this case, I'm not really even trying to say diversify. I'm saying to shift with the changing culture around you. There is one option in which the church can relocate, and as people move in, as demographics shift in that community, likely the people that were being reached have moved to other communities, or in a lot of cases, suburbs. I'm not even going to give an assessment on whether or not that's good or bad. It's just the way it is, and so we're not.
I'd say it's sinful in most cases. I'll go out on a limb. I'll take your bait.
I'm not baiting, and I'm not going to say it's sinful. Our church relocated.
I will.
Our church relocated 8 years ago, and it needed to. And it relocated to a place that was much better for its members. Because the reality is, once the membership have moved out, that is the church. The church moved. And for various reasons, my wife and I pick houses based on communities, what we like about the community, the kind of house it is, and that sort of stuff. We don't base anything on the race. We don't want to live in a certain area because of the race. So I'm not going to pretend like people are sinful because they want to live where they want to live. That's fine. That's okay. And once everybody moved to that suburb, that church moved to that suburb. Now you're just talking about whether or not you're going to move the building. And there are times where people do that. And there are other times where a church moves in. And if there's a new Hispanic church started because everybody came into that community, that's not sinful either. And if a Caucasian church starts in the suburbs, that's not sinful either. So you can relocate. But I'm talking about once you have it. Like, let's say relocation's off the table. What are you going to do to actually reach the people in that area? How do you diversify?
Yeah, good question. One, I think relocation needs to be off the table in the vast majority of cases. I think white flight was driven by racial problems. Mm-hmm. I think that's been pretty well established. I think a lot of churches moved out into the suburbs for the wrong reasons. That they did not want to reach the community. In many cases, there was more people around them, not less. Mm-hmm. They just didn't like the people that were around them. Now, I'm not going to speak to any individual case because I've actually, in one of my consultations, I recommended a church relocate because they were in an industrial area, and I'm like, there's no people around you. Like, yeah. It was like it was a spot where this is a really bad spot. This is a really bad spot for a church. People can't hardly find you. Right. Even if they want to come here, it's tough to find. So there are times for it. That's what I'm going to say. In the majority of cases, if not the vast majority of cases, I think that relocation is a bad idea because of the motives behind it. I can't speak to any individual case, of course. You may say, well, my church did that. It wasn't a bad thing. Okay, that's great. It's good for you. You can stand before God, and he's going to say, hey, well done, good and faithful servant. I'm just saying, in most cases, it was not healthy for the community. It was not healthy for the church. And I think for most churches, relocation needs to be off the table. I think you are planted in a particular address for a reason, that you should be committed to that address. You should be committed to your neighborhood. And relocation is just a way to get out of doing God's mission where you should be doing it. Now, if you're like, hey, there's another relocation, start another campus. Like, well, we got people out there. We'll start another campus with those people. There's other options there. But I think the problem can be solved with children's ministries. So, we're talking about ethnic diversity, but we could also talk about socioeconomic diversity as well. In today's world, like I know in Bradenton, we have racial issues, of course. Every community does, but they're very mild relative to other places. We all seem to get along just fine. Our bigger issue is socioeconomic because, there's definitely some tensions between people who live here and the homeless population and all of that. So we tend to have more socioeconomic tensions than we do racial tensions. That being said, I think a lot of when people think about shifting demographics, they think ethnicity. I think that's kind of where most people's minds go to first. So I think this problem can be resolved in the preschools, at least from an ethnic perspective. You just work hard to be ethnically diverse with your children's ministry, and that it'll take a generation, but it will move its way through the church. If you are a predominantly white older church, well, my grandparents came of age when the U.S. was like 90% white. So most of the churches back then, you're looking back 50, 60, 75 years ago, Well, that was the demographics of the U.S. Now, we're going to be a minority white nation 15 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen a demographic shift.
How does somebody work hard to diversify the children's ministry? Because, that's the struggle. The people are coming, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to subscribe to the idea that you just need to, think happy thoughts and different people will show up. People are going to the church, not just the white people are going to white churches. The Hispanics, the blacks, they're going to their churches as well. They're going to the churches that are predominantly them as well. And I don't mean their churches like they're not allowed in these churches or we're not allowed in their churches. I'm sure that they would welcome me. But people tend to go. And so, if you're an English-speaking Caucasian pastor, how do you actually reach those people? Because it's not that you wouldn't welcome them. It's that they're not interested in coming to that church.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we've done is we've hired towards the people that we want to reach.
Right.
So we knew,
yeah,
we knew we had a strong Hispanic population in our community. Well, guess what? We kind of need a Hispanic ministry. Well, do we hire the full-time communications director who's going to do social media? Or do we hire a Spanish-speaking pastor? Well, we decided the other position is great, but it's more of a luxury. We really need an evangelist in our community who's going to go reach the, 45% of the community that's Hispanic. So that's
that brings up a good idea.
That's a missiological principle, right? Mm-hmm. So, wow, there's a people group that speaks a language we don't speak in another country. Well, we're going to train up someone to learn the language. We're going to invest in them, and we're going to send them. We're going to, to the people group. We're going to translate the scriptures for them. We're going to put this full-on investment to reach that unreached people group. Well, your community isn't quite like that, from a missiological standpoint, because the ends of the earth is different than Jerusalem, of course. But that concept still kind of applies. It's like, wow, we've got a lot of Spanish speakers around us. We might need to invest our resources in hiring somebody who can reach them, which is what we did at West Bradenton. And we might need to invest resources in our children's ministry that will help diversify the children's ministry, whether that be a person of color, a person who speaks the language. So we have made some very intentional efforts to bring people onto our team and onto our staff who know that world, who know that language.
Yeah.
We do it for missionaries. Why wouldn't we do it in our churches?
Yeah. Yeah, that brings up a really good point, Sam. I think, if you were trying to diversify your children's ministry, one thought would be, because I could hear a church go, we can't hire another pastor. That's they think that that's the most expensive hire. Well, what if your children's minister spoke this other language of the people? And so that might be the next hire. That would be really in the case, we keep using Spanish and Hispanics.
That's just my world. That's Bradenton.
So hire a bilingual children's minister or at least a Hispanic children's minister. Maybe he or she speaks English. But you could hire that. I think that's... See, these are intentional steps. What I'm saying is you're going to have to make some intentional steps. Put signage in both Spanish and English. Don't just do basketball camp. Do soccer camp. And that's not stereotyping. That's just a general interest. If you get out into your community and ask people and meet people and be like, what are they interested in? What are their needs? What are the things that we can start ministering to them in? Then let's meet them in those places. I think that's one of the steps. If you're not doing that, if you're not meeting them, then you're not going to reach them.
Yeah, and signage is just a very simple thing. And that's not the end all, of course. But we have two signs on 43rd. So our church is at 1305 43rd Street West. Yeah. We have two signs. The one facing north says, for the neighborhood. The one facing south says, para la comunidad, which is roughly translated, for the neighborhood.
For the community, yeah.
Yeah, the community and neighborhoods, we had some long conversations with our Spanish speakers about words that apply to neighborhood, and there's some words that don't translate into English that can be a bit derogatory.
Yeah.
It's like an English speaker would be like, yeah, the neighborhood, and it's like, whoa, you don't want to say that about our community. It's just certain Spanish words. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But that does bring up the cultural sensitivity side of it. Like, if you're not trying. So when I heard that, when one of our Spanish speakers chuckled, and I'm like, okay, why are you? Because they laugh when I try to speak in Spanish. I'm not that great. And I was like, what's going on? They're like, well, that translation in my country, it kind of, it sort of means something different. I'm like, okay, well, it might be a good idea for us not to put that on the sign if that's the reaction. So by cultural sensitivity, I don't mean wokeness or whatever term you want to use. I just mean common sense. Like,
right. Well, the key is that you had a conversation. You're having a conversation with a demographic that you don't fully understand. And the same, look, if it is socioeconomic, this is going to be the same principles that apply. It can all be English, but there's a certain way that people dress. There's a certain vocabulary that people use. And I've been around it. I've been around people that are much more highly educated than I am, that come from money and that sort of stuff. And they're speaking about things and talking in a way I don't understand, because that's not the world that I'm from. And so there can
Josh,
be
my Bentley is getting serviced. It's been a rough day.
Something like that. Like, I just don't understand it. And so I think there just needs to be a sensitivity to it. I guess the bottom line for me when I was listening to that show was like, it's going to happen. What is the cycle that your community's in? Come to terms with it. Be honest about it. It's not when, it's not if, it is, it's just who. Who's the demographic shifting to? And then what are we going to do about it? What kind of shifts are we going to make? If relocation is off the table, then I would say then we're staying. So how do we invest? And look, I 100% agree with you. I think the church should stay. You should shift. You should reach the community. You should broaden your reach and the way that you understand it. The question just is how? So let's take the relocation off. Let's stop talking about that. And let's just go into this community and start meeting people and figure out how we can reach them with the gospel of Jesus.
Last thing, a lot of current church growth principles were championed with the homogeneous unit principle as a bit of a foundation. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't mean to nerd out too much here, but Donald McGavran, Bridges of God, I think it was 1955 is when the book was published. Very good book. Donald McGavran, incredible thinker, came up with this idea that people tend to come to Christ around others who are like them. And that's generally true. If you're an English speaker, you're going to come to Christ around an English speaker. I'm not so opposed to sign gifts. Like, people can speak other languages and understand. I believe in those miracles. That being said, it's not typical. It's a miracle. So if you're an English speaker, another English speaker is going to lead you to the Lord. And McGavran noticed that, and he noticed it culturally. And there's a lot of good to the homogeneous unit principle, but it kind of morphed and changed. And by the time we get to certain thinkers like Peter Wagner, who did put out some good stuff, but had some, perhaps some bad advice for churches later in his career when it comes to using the homogeneous principle as a means of exclusion. So it's okay to relocate because you're a white church in a black community, so just move to a different place. And I think that we've taken that principle, the homogeneous unit principle, and I think that we've warped it in a way that has not been beneficial to the kingdom of God. And I think that because of the diversity of the United States right now, and because we're only going to become more diverse, we will be minority white in about 15 years. This homogeneous unit principle is really becoming the heterogeneous unit principle, meaning your children, your grandchildren are going to want to be around more diversity, right, not less, because that's just what they know. That's what they're comfortable with. And I feel it when I travel to a state that's, predominantly white or whatever. Like, when Erin and I go back home, my wife's Erin, we go back home, we walk through the airport, it's in an area that's almost all white, and it's like, wow, you kind of forget, like, it's just different. It's not wrong. I mean, that community is what it is. If your community is not diverse, If your community is 90 or 98% white or whatever it is, then that's what your church should be. That's not a problem. The problem comes when you're not willing to do the missiological work to reach the people around you. It's like God planted you there for a reason. Why would you leave the mission field? Well, I just don't like the people around me. It's like, or I just don't look like the people around me. It's like, the last time I checked, the gospel calls us to reach people who are like us, and the gospel calls us to reach people who are not like us. So I would just say that I think this is a very important discussion. I'm probably more extreme than most, but I don't care. I'm going to share.
That's the way you are on every topic. So I just I thought it was an interesting quote. I thought it was an interesting thing to do. Everybody knows it. Everybody talks about it once it's like this little white church in an all Hispanic community, or this formerly glorious, large African-American church that's now in a gentrified community, and everybody around them is upper class Hispanic. Everybody talks about it at that point. What I'm saying is, as you're riding that wave up, which a lot of this megachurch growth movement was, you move out and you just like open the nets and let them all come in. This is who's moving here. As you're riding that up, realize it will shift. And so how are we prepping for different ways to shift with it? Are we ready to shift? That's what I'm kind of asking at this point. So anyways, we ran out of time.
We did. I mean, we could kind of continue this discussion in a lot of different directions, but we will close it down for now for the sake of our listeners. Enough ranting and raving from King Josh and Sam I Am. So
we should start saying that.
Joe Wiki and Sam I Am. There we go.
Yeah.
Check out the bookstore, Church Answers. Go to churchanswers.com, click on the bookstore link. We've got all sorts of great curated content there. Would love for you to purchase from us. We can just be straight up with you. We've been delivering digital products to your computer. Now we can deliver physical products to your door.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. One of the biggest ways that you can help us out is if you hear a quote or a tweetable thing that you hear from us, go ahead and tweet that out. Give us some credit. Just go ahead and say you heard it on EST. We'd love to help other people as they're thinking missiologically about their established church. We'll catch you next week.